allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have any visitor comments? Okay. Dr. Mahan, you have some updates for us.
Yes, I want to note that we had a very good meeting with representatives from the Southern Lehigh Public Library this morning, and we're very grateful to have our board representative, Mrs. Parsons, here joining us tonight. We were asked to join a meeting this morning to talk about the library's consideration of a referendum for taxes, and among other issues that we discussed. And so that is an issue that very directly involves the Board of Education. And so as a result, we have this meeting that has been arranged tonight so that the library can make a presentation of its ideas and its thoughts, and the board would have the opportunity to respond, ask questions, and to kind of ferret out this very important topic. So,
I brought help. This is Mark Sullivan. Mark came last time. He's a representative from the district libraries. So if there's something that I can't answer, I'm hoping that he will be able to. And I want to thank Dr. Mahan and Mr. Pepe for meeting with us. It was just those two plus our library director, Mark, and myself. One of our board members that was planning to come was sick, so that was it. And we had a really good conversation. And like you said, it was about the referendum, and the library is the first, or the school board is the first of our funders that were talking about the referendum. And it was really good because Mr. Pepe's on point with anything money, as you all know, and he was able to really help us see what might work, what might not work. So. But first, I'd like to start off with what's going on with Lower Saucon Township, because I think that's what you all had, that's what my email said at first, what's going on between the library and Lower Saucon. So I was going to give you an update since the last time that we were here, which was in November. And it's such a story. So we got a new solicitor in November, someone that wasn't associated with any board around here. He's an independent. And he met with the Lower Saucon solicitor, Treadwell. Actually, he didn't meet. He had a phone call with him. In that conversation, Mr. Treadwell is the solicitor for Lower Saucon Township. And he spoke here at the school board a few months ago. He asked us if we would accept $10,000 on a month-to-month basis, which was interesting. So at our meeting in January, we discussed what that would mean, and we wanted to know if, with OCL rules, the Office of Commonwealth Libraries, what that would mean, because it says in general, tell me if this is right, Mark, if a municipality funds more than 15% of its total budget, it should have representation. Is that right? Something like that?
15% of total municipal contributions. That's the short.
And then we had talked about having them use our library, Lower Saucon Township residents, use our library on a month-to-month basis. And the reason right now, I mean, at that time in December, Lower Saucon residents could use our library, as could anyone from Bucks County, anywhere in the state, actually, as long as they had a Pennsylvania library card with access on it. But at the end of December, Hellertown Area Library cut off all of Lower Saucon Township's service. They had cut them off of their service area in December, this had not been approved by the Office of Commonwealth Libraries. And I hope this isn't too confusing, but in October, all libraries in the state have to say what their service area is. Our service area, as you know, is Lower Milford, Coopersburg, and Upper Saucon Township. Lower Saucon's service area was Hellertown Borough and Lower Saucon Township. But because Lower Saucon Township had stopped funding them, and because they had specifically requested that they be removed from their service area, Hellertown Area Library did not put them on as someone that they would be servicing anymore. So Hellertown Area Library said they would no longer service Lower Saucon Township residents. So at our December meeting, we thought, well, the Lower Saucon Township residents will not have a library. What should we do? But we had not gotten the official word from Office of Commonwealth Libraries if that had been approved or not, because it was still up in the air. So we decided at our December meeting that we would continue to service Lower Saucon Township residents, giving them a grace month. What the heck? There's not that many of them anyway that come into our library. And then shortly after that, beginning of January, we found out the Office of Commonwealth Libraries did decide to cut Lower Saucon off. And at our January meeting, let's see. Oh, and Lower Saucon Township offered to reimburse the residents $40 a family to buy library cards from other libraries. The catch is that there's no other libraries that would let them become members. Well, and Hellertown did that in January. This is Kat Moyer. She's another of our library board members, and she's pretty much the Lower Saucon Township historian. She's been keeping detailed notes and receipts. So, also in January, the OCL allowed Hellertown to drop Lower Saucon. So at our January Southern Lehigh Public Library Board meeting, dozens of Lower Saucon Township residents came. More residents, more people than I have ever seen at a board meeting. And we had 30 emails. It reminded me very much of when this board that I was sitting on decided to close Lower Milford. I had never gotten so many emails asking, and they all asked with one voice for us not to join in a permanent basis with Lower Saucon Township Library. Not one of them said this might be a good idea. But they're not our funding partners, so we took their voices into account, but we have a fiduciary responsibility to our funders, not to Lower Saucon Township residents, and we were all aware of that. So our library board decided that we would have a short meeting with two of our board representatives and our attorney, along with the Lower Saucon Township attorney and a Lower Saucon Township supervisor, to see where we stand. Because after Mr. Treadwell offered $10,000, which, by the way, the Lower Saucon Township residents were quite surprised to hear about, that had not been reported out at their township meeting. But we wanted to know what was going on, and because the conversation with our solicitor and their solicitor was more of a casual one, like, what do you think? Think you would take 10,000? So our people met up with their people, and Mr. Treadwell said that it was actually up to the library to come up with the terms. So at our February board meeting, we had a long discussion, and we thought, okay, we'll offer Lower Saucon Township to pay $37.50 a month just to be able to use Southern Lehigh Public Library. They couldn't have access privileges. They couldn't use any of the libraries that are in our cooperative, because we couldn't make that decision for our other libraries. That's how our co-op works. And so we would do it on a month-to-month basis, just see how it works. And the purpose of that was the idea to see how many residents actually come for us and for them. Because if we wanted to join with Lower Saucon Township, we want to see what it's like. We don't think it's a good idea to just jump into something like that, because we just don't, just want to see. And that seemed like a good idea to us. So we sent that, our attorney drew up some papers and sent that off to Lower Saucon Township, and we haven't heard anything from them since. And that was at the February meeting. And what's the other thing? Well, I think that's it. Okay. Now I have questions that Dr. Mayan had sent me. Would you like me to? So a couple of us have talked about it, and I've come up with some answers. Would you like me to go through them, or do you want to just come up with fresh questions? Okay. All right. That sounds fine. Good, because I've thought about these. So the question, does the library board intend to seek a referendum to levy a tax? And if so, what are the details of the referendum? What are the other avenues that the SLPL investigate before considering the school district sponsoring it? And will the SLPL board proceed with the referendum even if the school district is opposed to the idea? The Southern Lehigh Public Library Board is currently exploring the possibility of a tax referendum as part of its strategic plan and as part of our fiduciary responsibility to ensure that we've explored all options to ensure the continued stability of our library. The board wished to gather more information about what that would look like. So in addition to a brief conversation with the county to understand the logistical process, and when I say with the county, I mean with the voter registration, because voter registration is a process that, we haven't done this before, so we wanted to get the details from the county. So we met with them, and we also had a conversation this morning with Dr. Mayan and Mr. Pepe. And we appreciate their feedback, and we'll share that with our board at its next meeting. Our next board meeting is next Tuesday. And our residents all fall within the school district, and with our understanding of the process, a conversation with Southern Lehigh seemed like a good first step. We also need to understand our other funding partners' thoughts on the issue and community views before the board would further consider a referendum. We're also continuing things like hiring a grant writer or development director to help us with our funding stream. And the other reason that you're first is because Upper Saucon Township, there are 4 people on our board from Upper Saucon Township. And at the moment, there are 2 people, and our third person, our president, Candy Kraus, has not been officially reappointed to the board. So we really have 2.5 members from Upper Saucon Township. I understand tonight, Mr. Mond, your wife is going to be appointed to our board. Congratulations, from Upper Saucon Township. So that was why we started with the school district, though. And the next one is bylaws. Is library board considering any changes in the current bylaws? Currently, the bylaws define board membership by percentage of donation. It appears that there are voting members from municipalities that do not meet the contribution threshold for voting membership. And is there insight into that issue? So those 2 members from municipalities are Lower Milford and Coopersburg that do not give us 15%. And the answer is a revised draft copy of the library bylaws was sent to the school district on September 17th. Upper Saucon Township is currently reviewing that draft, and we expect feedback from Upper Saucon Township sometime in quarter 2023. There are no other bylaw updates under consideration. We did not receive specific feedback from the school district, but if you have comments or ideas, we'd be happy to take those notes back to our board. In terms of your question about representation, this is a historical practice of the board to ensure that all funding partners have a voice and a vote for the operation of its library. We understand that this has been precedence with other libraries that fall under OCL, and we are currently investigating this alongside UST as it's within the bylaw updates. And Upper Saucon Township holds the lease for our building. And part of the requirements of that lease is that if there's any bylaw changes, that they have to approve them, right? Yeah. General question about Lower Saucon. In a recent library board meeting, the sentiment was expressed that the library board would limit Lower Saucon Township's contribution so as to prevent it from achieving voting status. This is the position of the board. The proposal provided to Lower Saucon Township was for a month-to-month arrangement to allow both parties to determine if a permanent relationship makes sense. It is the board's position that a temporary funding relationship should not have a voting board member, but if we move forward with a permanent relationship and adding them to our direct service area, they should have a voice just like our other current funders do. And we did discuss having a non-voting board member, even on a month-to-month. That's something that we think about. In fact, it would be kind of good because then we could understand what they're thinking if they were required to attend our board meetings. And just as a side note, we did get some numbers, and I think there are 99 people that have library cards that are Lower Saucon residents. They're not active right now because we also stopped serving them, but there are 553 Lower Saucon Township residents that have Hellertown library cards. And that's not like it's 553 against 99, because all of those 99 had to first get Hellertown library cards. Lower Saucon, blah, blah, blah. Oh, okay. Can you provide details on the logic of or reasoning behind limiting the large donation, in this case, Lower Saucon Township? Previously, the library was very concerned about securing Southern Lehigh School District funding and the need for donations from the Southern Lehigh School District operating budget. However, SLPL suggested that Lower Saucon Township reduce their donation by roughly the amount of Southern Lehigh School District's annual donation. Last year, LST donated a gift of $50,000 to our library. How have those funds been used? Lower Saucon Township offered SLPL a $50,000 donation in 2022. Our board had no input on the value or existence of that donation. Those funds were applied to our Helping Hands campaign, like all general donations from the public. It has helped cover the legal expenses related to the potential addition of Lower Saucon Township. We had legal fees of $13,500 in 2022 versus an initial budget of $200, and budgeted $15,000 in 2023 to cover anticipated legal challenges. Our new attorney charges quarterly, so we'll have a year-to-date 2023 number in our March financials. We are currently reviewing our capital plan and may apply any funds left over towards our much-delayed lighting project or other capital projects that would best serve our patrons. And a strategic plan. What is the status of your strategic planning effort, and what are SLPL's initial plans for library modernization? As you know, the school district operates 5 libraries, and your statistics and strategic plan are valuable for our planning purposes. And the answer is, one of the focuses of the library board is keeping current with the wants and needs of our patrons. This is one of the items we explored in the focus groups for the strategic plan. We're part of an 11 library cooperative, and literally thousands of books and movies are available for downloading or streaming. In the past few months, we've added, through district support, several hotspots to borrow for those without reliable internet access, and museum passes for our patrons to use at several local institutions: America on Wheels, Peerless, Buckhouse, Bucks County Children's Museum, etc. We also have computers available for patrons in the adult, children, and YA sections, and technology assistance from our librarians to ensure that everyone has digital literacy skills that they need. If you have additional thoughts on modernization, we'd love to have them. Statistics. What is the status or plan to refine statistics and metrics to the library users that provide valuable information on how the facilities and services are used? In the previous discussion, it was mentioned that there is no current way to track member use, demographics, etc. in finer detail. This information will aid the library in understanding how to adapt and modernize within the strategic plan currently. So the answer is, we use Spark system and have worked to better enhance the data available in circulation. We recently launched cards for children under the age of 5 as well. That said, many adults check out material on behalf of their children, so usage doesn't always tie directly to a specific reader or user, and statistics are always anonymized to ensure patron privacy. But we know what's being checked out and use that information to determine what people may like and what we should discard. We listen to our patrons when they request something we don't have and it's not available at the other libraries in our co-op. During the summer, we have available all the books on the school summer reading lists. Our children's programs are often filled to the maximum capacity. During our strategic plan listening sessions, we asked each group what we could do to improve. We know how many people are attending our programs and where they live. If there are specific statistics you'd like, we will investigate if it's possible with the solutions we have available. And if you have questions on the current statistics packet, please let us know. And I'll just add that in every board packet, you do get statistics. This is the last one that was sent. It's from the year 2022 statistics, and it details how many residents of each municipality, how many ebooks are checked out, e-audiobooks, e-magazines, movies, TV, music, circulation totals for barcoded items and electronic resources by fiscal year. And And then the patrons again, circulation of the items and also by municipalities. So if there's, and I understand that when you get board packets, there's always a lot of stuff in it and it's easy to miss things. But if there's anything that we're not telling you, please let us know and we'll get that information. Did I miss anything?
I'm sorry, I have a few follow-up questions.
Mhm.
We asked how many people were walking through the door, and you answered with the number of items that you can count that are circulated.
Oh, that's in here too.
Do you know how many people have you been able to resume counting, and do you have that data?
Oh, I see what you're saying. No, their counter has not been replaced. We don't have the funding for it, and the Office of Commonwealth Libraries does not require us to know.
How much is a counter?
I don't know. Do you want me to find that out?
No, you said you didn't have the money for it, so I'm just curious.
Well, we talked about it this morning, and our director said that it was just something not in our budget.
You also mentioned that the current board, I assume everybody who's on the board currently is voting, and the practice has been for them to vote.
Sure.
But the rules, the bylaws, do not permit them to vote if they
You
do
can
not
speak to that,
contribute
Mark.
15%. So,
Yeah, and so I may have mentioned it in passing, a few months ago too. So a short answer is that Office of Commonwealth, this is what the 15% rule is in the Pennsylvania Code. But the reality is the Office of Commonwealth Libraries will look the other way, so to speak, as long as all of the local actors agree on something. If it's slightly outside of that rule, as long as everyone locally agrees upon it, what are they going to say?
how do you know that they locally agree on it?
Well, in this particular case, the fact that this arrangement with Lower Milford and Coopersburg having voting members has gone on for decades.
And is that in the bylaws, the current bylaws, that voting?
I believe it is, yes.
So the bylaw
411.
revisions that you're looking to make will allow for those members who are not supposed to be voting to vote? I mean,
As far as I know, the bylaw iteration that is in front of Upper Saucon does include the current arrangement, continuing the current arrangement. And what I mentioned to these gentlemen this morning was that in all my time, I've been in this position 10 years, library world for 15, and anywhere else that I've heard of. The problem is always getting the municipalities to care, getting them to be on board and be active and appoint the members and such in a timely manner and have that interest. We never have had the problem. I've never seen the problem where a municipality cares too much. And like in this case where they say, there's a couple people here who technically shouldn't be voting. And so given that that's just been the reality on the ground, I have always advised all the libraries in this district to continue to allow the Coopersburgs of the world to have a vote, because that is how you keep the relationship growing and the way that you're going to hopefully get increased funding in the future.
and I have one last question regarding the referendum. Is that designed to replace the current funding streams that are in existence today? So you'd be looking for that referendum to provide all of the resources for Southern Lehigh Public Library in addition to what you get from the state?
Correct.
You wouldn't be looking to Coopersburg, Lower Milford, Southern Lehigh School District? Okay. Other questions and comments? Dr. Serene?
So just since we are talking about numbers with respect to people coming through the door, since that came up, I guess in your viewpoint, given your experience for both of you or all of you, from the library's perspective, is the load on a library's resources a combination of members who come through the door as well as materials that are checked out, I would assume, circulation data, I would assume. Like what's
Yeah.
more relevant?
I think they're both.
Yeah.
They're both relevant.
When we rent out the meeting rooms, and the meeting rooms are continuously used, they always keep track of that, as well as the children's programs. So that's another tell right there. Our library is well used.
So when it comes to financial resources and scarcity, when you go into that realm, is it more that you feel like, and I know we've talked about exact things, but it's more of an, it's not an exact science, I guess what I'm asking for with respect to the answer, but in your experience, do you find that what you lack is having enough materials, like new books that are coming up? For example, I know that, as a patron myself, that, new books have longer waiting lists for holds, which is important for the community because books are not cheap if you want to buy them. So I know being able to use the library for that type of resource, and I know you have videos and other things, but I'm just curious, like just from your perspective, what.
Well, I can tell you as a former library employee, and I worked there for almost 16 years, that what happens if there's a popular Grisham book or something, we will get another copy. And often we'll get it. We can even get it from the book sale room for free because someone's donated it. So then we'll put that into circulation. We really try to keep our patrons happy. And if you work at the front desk, and everybody, including our director, works the front desk, what's popular. Yeah, and if the hold lists get too long, then you get another copy.
And then don't you also have, and just as for others too, I do know the answer to this, but you have limits with respect to how many items someone can check out by like the same author, for example, in popular series for children.
I think it's 5. It's
but the point is the limits exist.
There is
for a
limit.
reason.
Right.
So I did have, I'm sorry, I just figured it's easier one by one to ask all of them, but like you did. But you mentioned, I just wanted to clarify the numbers with respect to the 553 and the 99. Does that mean basically it's the sum total of those two numbers that we would be potentially dealing with from Lower Saucon? And I know we've talked numbers.
And that's the thing. We don't know. We don't
but
know.
Potential.
Yeah, the potential, it could be next month, Lower Saucon Township could say, we're not going to reimburse Hellertown, anyone that wants a Hellertown area library card. You're going to all have to go to Southern Lehigh if they want to go with our month to month. And that was the other reason we thought month to month, because what if they pay us $3,500 a month, and all of a sudden we've got all 11,000 residents of Lower Saucon Township coming. Mm-hmm. We want to be able to adjust the agreement. You just don't know what's going to happen. We're just trying to be good stewards of our finances.
And one last question.
Right.
We talked a little bit about the Coopersburg, Lower Milford, their percentage and their voting status. How close are they to 15%? You may have said this, not even close.
Do you know?
I don't.
They're at 6.
They're at 6. Okay. That's why I know someone has said it, but I just want to remember.
And I got to say that just like a lot of boards, 99% of the votes are consensus, everybody voting one way. There's been very, very few votes where we've had, one or two people. There's like never a vote that's 4 or 5 or whatever we are. 7 people. Yeah. Yeah.
Could I ask another question about Emily over here? Hi. Could I ask another question about circulation, something that was brought up, I believe, at the last meeting, and Dr. Shreen's comments jarred it in my mind again. There was talk about online resources, and books can be physically checked out when folks walk in, but that they can also be checked out from electronically from an online resource. Overdrive. Thank you. I couldn't think of the term. Through Overdrive. Do the individuals who have access to Southern Lehigh's library through this temporary system, I know they don't have access to the library access system, but do they have access to the Overdrive system?
We were talking about that.
So some of them, but not others. Oh, that's gotcha. Okay. Thanks. Okay. So part of that electronic, correct. So part of that system, what I'm hearing is a part of the entire access program and those online programs. I'm just repeating into the mic for the folks listening. And part of those online programs that Lower Saucon would currently have access to would be only those solely used. Owned by Southern Lehigh Library, so it's limited. My next question then doesn't line up. But is my understanding correct that even though a library book is checked out through Overdrive and is an electronic resources, there are still a limited number of copies that can be checked out at a time.
Absolutely.
So that's
Yes.
something I think folks don't necessarily, I didn't understand
Mhm.
at first about the system until I used it.
Mhm.
So even if it's an electronic book and you don't have a physical copy, it's an electronic copy, you can only have licensure to, check out electronically maybe 2 or 3 of those books. So there's still a limitation, even though it's electronic, on the number of folks who can use it. I just want to make sure I was understanding that concept.
That's correct. And I think it is something it's surprising to most people that digital books cost money, just like if you were going to buy one from Amazon.
Right.
It costs money. And that we only buy so many copies of them and they disappear after, 2 weeks?
Yes.
It's really short.
Yes.
Um,
Thanks. And also, I know that your children's programming that you mentioned, I'm not sure about the, I'm aware as a school board member and as a parent in the community, the sign-up lists for your children's programs are prioritized to district residents, and that
Yes.
for at least for this season, for the past year or two, or I don't know how far back, they have been maxed out with waiting lists just for Southern Lehigh residents. So you haven't even been able to expand beyond Southern Lehigh residents to other folks.
That's correct.
Okay, thanks. I just want to make sure my
And
understanding
it
was
has
right
been
on
a
that.
conversation that we've had about if Lower Saucon joins us, even on a month-to-month basis, could we somehow include them with some of our children's programs? Because our focus is just like yours, helping the kids out, and trying to serve as many people as we can.
Okay, thanks for that info.
If I can make one quick comment about the overdrive that addresses actually both questions. Your
Thank you.
question was about, the does the library have enough money to pay for these resources? And the answer for electronics is really no. The way we work it as the consortium is all the libraries are responsible for populating the collection. The district pays for the platform fee on top, but the libraries themselves. But that is nowhere near sufficient to meet the needs and the demand of the district residents. And so we get a separate pot of money to be spent just on district-wide, district-level services. And this past year, we added $20,000 from the district budget just to buy extra copies and more e-resources to try to meet the demand. Individual libraries.
Okay, I have a series of questions. Number one, you were talking about the tryout with Lower Saucon for having a month-to-month membership. Do you have a idea on the sunset or decision point on that? How many months or how many years the decision goes on?
Well, no, we really want to have a discussion with Lower Saucon Township to talk more about it. I mean, they threw out a number and we threw out a number, and
Yeah.
not much words between us.
Yeah, I just was curious about sunsetting because it's always good to have a goal out there so that, both parties know how far this is going. We got to get to a decision point. I want to talk about the referendum and the millage. I think it's 0.22% that's proposed. Is that right?
We have thrown out a couple numbers a couple months ago. I threw out 0.2. At this exact moment, I don't think we're ready or willing to land on a particular number. What we need to keep in mind is what the library needs to replace. They need to replace all municipal funding.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, the board president put some stuff together, and she's unfortunately not here tonight, about what should be included. And I think we included at least a portion of the annual fund drive expectation, because you figure people said, I already paid you a tax. Why are you asking me for more money? Somebody's going to say that. There's going to be capital improvements that may need to be added in there. There's going to be, I don't know, I don't want to call them wish list items because they are really more needed than wishes, about increasing staff wages, potential benefits. So adding in those kind of things and coming up with the number that they want to replace. And we got some good feedback from these gentlemen this morning that is very much worth bringing to the board to discuss and work all that information into a number that everybody can see that the value is there.
Yeah. I'm a fan of goals. What's the goal for a referendum if that's what you're choosing here?
How do you mean?
When? The timing?
When? At this moment, they're looking at the fall.
The fall. So this November
Yeah.
election cycle. So there's a lot to figure out before then.
It can be done. Some libraries have been forced to do it really, really quick. So it can be done.
Okay. So getting back to the millage and the budget, when you look at the library budget, how much of a reserve or surplus is there?
Currently, no. I actually am personally just going over Southern Lehigh's numbers about to their 2022 numbers, because I'm the one who reviews everybody's reports before they go to the state. But so I don't have I'm assuming it has not changed much. And last year they had just under, you have, okay, so it's just over 1 year's budget is what they have in the bank.
So yeah, it's about $500,000 in reserve.
486 it looks
Right.
like.
So
yeah.
it's 100% of a typical annual budget. Mr. Pepe, what is ours? We have a $72 million budget, I think. And okay, the 6% reserve. Now, along with that, you talked about capital improvements. What kind of capital improvements are on the horizon? Hi, Lynette.
Hi, I'm sorry I'm late. I had a previous meeting.
No worries.
We have been trying to complete a lighting project that we've had for the last several years. We have about 90,000, somewhere between 90 and 100,000 left to complete, project valued. And then we are behind in a capital improvement plan that was outlined, taking us out 25 years. That was done several years ago. We're behind in that. So we're looking at carpeting is probably our next biggest expenditure. And then, of course, there's been smaller things along the way that perhaps we weren't expecting. So.
Okay, so when we look at all of those numbers compared to a $500,000 annual reserve, how does that fit when you have, I don't know, the numbers you talked about was, I don't know, maybe less than 100 or maybe less than 200 at best or at worst. How does that coincide with having challenges with capital investment? You know what I mean?
I don't know. I need further explanation.
Okay,
for
so
what you're looking for.
in other words, you've got $500,000 in your reserve that's there, and you have then these expenses for lighting improvements, which are $90,000, carpeting, however much that is. Wouldn't that come out of a reserve budget? Is that not what it's for? Am I missing something? you know what I mean?
Yes,
Yeah.
a portion of the reserve budget. We have capital funds that are specifically for capital projects set aside. So some of it could come out of that,
Mm-hmm.
but we can't use all of our reserves on those capital projects.
Okay. What do you typically keep the reserves for? What's the typical philosophy in keeping a reserve of one full year of budget? You may not know I'm asking, but yeah, maybe we
No,
could
I
find
mean,
that out.
For example, when the pandemic hit, we
Yeah.
wanted to keep our people working. Fortunately, we were able
Uh-huh.
to obtain PPP loans
Right.
to keep services going.
Sure.
So emergency situations that you're not
Okay.
expecting.
Okay. And then you talked about, and then also regarding capital improvements, Upper Saucon Township owns that property. I don't know, how much is the lease for the property to the township?
$1 a year.
Okay. So when it comes to improvements on that capital, how are they involved, and do you need to do the improvements, or do they do it because they're the township and they're the owner of
They
the
do.
property?
They do have a capital fund set aside for the library that they add to on an annual basis.
Okay.
We have used that in the past mostly for replacement of HVAC units,
Mm,
which
mhm.
seem to go pretty quickly. And we try to budget that in every year now so that we keep up with that. They do own the property. They take care of the property. They do all the snow plowing, lawn maintenance, tree trimming, things like that. However, the last major property improvement was the resurfacing of the parking lot.
Mm, mhm.
And even though they owned the property, they used library capital money that they had set aside to.
In their budget,
do
you
that.
mean? In your budget or in their budget?
Well, technically it's in their budget because,
Okay.
yeah, it's still their account.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the lighting, for example, is a permanent infrastructure to that building and a permanent improvement. I could see shelving for books and tables and that sort of thing potentially, but the lighting, I'm surprised that you'd have to foot that bill when it's a permanent improvement to their asset, but
Well,
that may
we-
be
we
something you
own-
can ask them, right?
Well,
Yeah.
it may come to where we ask for some of those
Mm-hmm.
funds. We have to front the money and then we ask them for reimbursement is how the process works. But anything in the building, including all the fixtures, all the systems in the building,
Yeah.
we own.
Okay. I'm putting together the pieces of the budget and how that works with respect to the donations from at least Southern Lehigh School District. I have nothing to do with the other entities other than being a resident, but I think that may be something you really want to investigate when that you compare that to the millage. I think when the public sees that, that's going to be problematic to some effect. And, if you were to calculate the millage, it seems to me that it would be in excess of what your current operating budget is today. Is there any comment on that? I guess, Mark, Mr. Sullivan, you mentioned you're still playing with the millage, I guess, right?
Yes, and that's what you said is a completely valid insight that the final number does have to be realistic. It has to pass a smell test and be able to be sold to the public.
Okay, and then I think this is the last question I have. And I think, Mr. Sullivan, when you were here before, you had talked about other libraries within our region, whether it be Northampton or Lehigh County, that the taxes are sponsored by, let's say, a school district, and they're collected via the school district and paid to the library. Which one of those do you know as an example would be that again? You mentioned them, I think, the last
Parkland
time.
and Whitehall both.
In
are-
Lehigh, right?
are both school districts.
Okay, so when we talk about those two entities and they collect the taxes, are they on the boards of those school district or of those libraries?
To my knowledge, they are not, but the collecting authority, if you want to say it that,
Right.
whoever it may be, we believe that the law says that they are responsible for appointing all the board members. It could be a school board member on the board also, but in general, if hypothetically the Southern Lehigh School Board
Sponsored
the tax, Southern Lehigh School Board would be responsible for appointing all board
So
members.
to put that pretty upfront. This entity here is the school board would in perpetuity, in that case, as long as that situation is set up, would be appointing all board members to the library. And there are how many? 9, is it, or 7? 7, right? So we would, in essence, appoint all 7 for the 3-year terms or whatever so deemed in the policies. And then the townships, whether it be Upper Saucon, Milford, or Coopersburg, would have no representation on that board. And that's typically, and that's what you're proposing at this point with the referendum, or how it would work from a
I think the
mechanic standpoint of that?
the proposition would be the first choice might be to use the school district because it happens to encompass the
All
entire
3.
library service area.
Uh-huh.
The two areas completely match. The expectation, that's after the fact would be negotiation about
Yeah.
where the board members come from. You'd like to think that obviously it would be representative of the entire school district.
Right. So now, Ms. Parsons, I guess since it's the board, you're on the board. Have the other entities, the other 3 entities, been have seen this discussion, or have you talked to them about the idea of them basically, the tax would be separate from what their contributions or donations are today?
As you may know, the other municipalities, Lower Saucon, Lower Milford, Upper Saucon, and Coopersburg, all have a fiscal year of January to December. So when Lynette went to each of the boards to talk about funds and if they would fund the library, that was a subject that came up. And that is something that we've had in every one of our
Mhm.
in our meetings.
And do they know the concept of not having any board representation then on that? Is that true? Okay. All right. I think that's all I have right now. Thanks.
So just to follow up on the referendum question. So if the if a referendum is proposed and if it passes, would that change the tax millage from the township at all?
That would be up to the township, right?
So the tax millage, so this would just be an additional tax.
Well, they could
Right.
they could certainly lower the taxes. Everybody could lower the taxes because they wouldn't be getting the money from, they wouldn't have to fund the library. That would be certainly up to them.
Yeah.
Great idea.
But there's no, it doesn't automatically change the millage. So it would just be an additional tax. Okay. And then could you just comment? So since there are 2 entities, Coopersburg and Lower Milford, who do not quite meet that 15% threshold, for how many years have they not met that threshold?
Forever. I think.
Forever.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And what is the library doing to maybe try to increase
Oh,
the
goodness.
funding?
We are a nonprofit that we have so little money that we ask for money. When we go to the funding partners, we explain what we do. We explain how we're serving their residents, and we ask them to, we can't threaten them. What else can we do?
Has the funding, has it just remained level? Has it gone up? Has it gone down? Can you just comment?
It's varied over the years.
Okay.
For the most part, Coopersburg has been tiny increases in their needs. Lower Milford has been more of a past couple years.
Lower Milford's decrease. And how about Upper Saucon Township?
Generally has increased.
Could you just comment on the percentage of the patrons that come from each?
You can see it
have that on
here.
there?
You
Okay.
see the
Okay.
see the tall line? That's Upper Saucon.
Okay.
The 2 short ones are Lower Milford.
Great.
Yep. It's
Is the funding proportional to, is it pretty proportional to population? Okay.
Wouldn't you say, Lynette, that it's like 70% of our patrons are Upper Saucon?
70%?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, that's where everybody lives. Right. All of us live in Upper Saucon.
Can I, I'm sorry, were you done?
You're good. Thank you.
It wasn't a question. Could I just summarize what they just, before I lose track of it, because it might be different? If that's okay, Jeff, it was like just one. So just to summarize, because now this is getting more and more confusing, I feel, in some ways. The item of a referendum is still somewhat up in the air with respect to how it would be crafted, under whose direction the board would be selected. And the millage is still up in the air because, of course, it's going to be proportional to what your needs are, I'm assuming. Because I just feel like we're getting away from that. So I just wanted to, sorry, Jeff.
Um, the has Upper Saucon, not the board representation on your library, but has Upper Saucon Township, their board or their leadership, provided feedback to you on what they think about the referendum?
I don't know.
They have not provided direct feedback. No. They have expressed, one member has expressed some doubt as to whether it would pass.
Have they provided feedback on the Lower Saucon Township issue?
Yeah.
What was their general feedback?
They would like us to take Lower Saucon Township on permanently, and they're pressuring us to do so.
Have they provided feedback on this bylaw issue? The voting members?
Yes, we had a meeting with them recently, and the township manager did make a couple of suggestions. They also asked for additional information, which we've given them. And so there hasn't been any contact or response from them after that.
What percentage of your board is made up by Upper Saucon's representatives?
4 out of the 7,
So they hold a majority,
that's correct.
but you guys so I'm trying to understand. It seems like, I don't know anything about this, but it just seems to me like the Upper Saucon library members potentially don't vote in accordance with what the feedback from the leadership is.
Well, I mean, it's a subject of which people can have different opinions, I suppose, in the fact that many of you probably have been in similar situations. For example, I'm on the municipal authority for this township, and but we're appointed by the boards of supervisors, but yet we're an independent board. Similarly, board members for libraries are appointed by whichever municipal mechanism is in place for that library. But when they become the board members, the library is a legally independent nonprofit, and there's the expectation that the board members are there because they want to fulfill the vision and mission of the library, and that may not coincide with the municipalities 100% of the time. Usually I would think it's not major issues like seem to be coming to head in these days. But then the mechanism for that is if the municipality is really unhappy, they can appoint new members.
Over time. And you'd agree with me that evidently this particular referendum would potentially result in Upper Saucon having no representation on a board. Potentially.
Again, that's a matter for negotiations once the
Well, if we
tax is
sponsored
passed.
it though, if we sponsored, I guess Upper Saucon has nothing to say about it.
The township as an entity, I guess not.
And historically, they've funded you guys beyond anybody, Upper Saucon, and that they give you your property and your lease for $1. And then this school board could sponsor you, and overnight, they would be without any representation, potentially, if we agreed to this referendum.
They would be choosing residents from Southern Lehigh School District, the majority of which live in Upper Saucon Township. I'm just trying to think reasonably. why in the world wouldn't they choose representatives from all over the school district, especially Upper Saucon?
No, I'm just saying it's like,
Technically,
it's
you're
a
right,
pretty
I'm
awesome
sure.
coup is what I'm thinking,
Oh.
which is overnight, we would vote to sponsor you. The historically library tax things, if you put them on, often are approved. If it was approved, we, I guess, and somehow would have the authority to then rework the entire, pretty much everything. And this school district board would sort of have carte blanche to generally sort of do what we want. And we would run Upper Saucon, right out of it, potentially. I just think that's an interesting fact, or possibility. I'm generally against any type of, I'll just state myself, not to do with even the school, the library. I'm all 100% for libraries, that's for sure. I wouldn't be able to go home at night.
Yeah,
But
good point there, Joe.
but I am 100% against approving any form of taxes in perpetuity. So you wouldn't get my vote for it. I'm certainly for funding the library, but not in the form of a separate tax. The folks from, can somebody tell me, I'm curious why Lower Saucon doesn't have any library representation, or they can't go to a library right now, right? Potentially.
No, they can buy library cards from Hellertown Area Library, and they have.
Okay.
And then Lower Saucon Township is reimbursing them $40 a person if they could choose Hellertown, or they can come and get it. They could go to Southern Lehigh. Not anymore.
What was the reason? And then you said there was a huge number of Lower Saucon Township residents,
Yeah.
as far as you would know, identified actually as Lower Saucon residents.
Oh, they signed in. Well,
not
we didn't check
Hellertown
them.
Borough. And
Yeah.
those folks came and expressed that they didn't want access to our library.
What they were saying was they didn't want us to enter into a permanent agreement with Lower Saucon Township.
What was their reasoning for that?
Basically, the Lower Saucon Township Board was not trustworthy, and that they didn't think it made sense because where the library is located, Hellertown is located similar to how Southern Lehigh Public Library is. We're there, and then Upper Saucon surrounds it.
Mhm.
The library is central to Upper Saucon Township. And the Hellertown Library is similar in Lower Saucon Township. So it would be like us saying, we're going to give money to Quakertown. Everybody's got to go to Quakertown now. I imagine there'd be an uproar.
I remember when I lived in Lower Saucon Township, and I had a membership to a library, and it was called Bethlehem Library. And we went to Bethlehem to the library, and that one's a little bit out of the way. Probably similar to Upper Saucon to Lower Saucon, I would think.
But they're not letting.
Yeah, I have membership in Bucks County and Bethlehem, Allentown, but that doesn't mean that's my favorite place to go. I'd much rather go 2 minutes away.
Thank you. That's the only questions I have.
Could I
Go
ask
ahead, just a quick follow-up, Sim.
Yeah, I have similar. No, go ahead. If you're,
You start looking at the financial side of it with a millage increase for a separate tax compared to another township entity entering into the library with the opportunity to donate, which was six figures from what I read in the papers. It seems to me that would be a budget windfall. And I guess, at least the way I would understand a library is that it has a charter of enriching the public knowledge, keyword being public. And I think that Lower Saucon is part of the public. So my question would be, if you were to look at apples to apples in that respect, isn't it a more economic and enriching partnership to include Lower Saucon versus going to a separate tax that is toward the rest of, let's say, the three municipalities in the school district? I guess that's my question.
And that's a great question. And I think it is something that we've thought of, but we really don't want to jump into, I was going to say bed, but that's probably not a good word. We just don't want to jump into this without thinking about it. And that's why we wanted to try the month to month. We may well end up having Lower Saucon Township on our board, but it's not as if they're just going to give us money and there won't be any requirements. Because as we talked about before, there's hiring requirements, because it doesn't matter how many people actually come to the library. If there's 11,000 residents, then we have to add how many full-time employees? 4 full-time employees.
So, yeah. Right. That's for a $10,000 or so dollar.
That is correct, but we do follow the rules of the Office of Commonwealth Libraries, and that's what our director follows. I think okay, I'm just going to speak as me.
Yeah.
I think there's a moral responsibility, and that is that I think the Lower Saucon Township residents would like to stay with Hellertown Area Library. There's another election in December.
Well, yeah, but on that point, I mean, you would agree with me that the elected officials of Lower Saucon Township think differently.
That is true.
Well, they were
That's
elected
true.
by the people of Lower Saucon Township,
Yeah,
correct? And so it seems to me, from everything I would take, and I don't know a whole lot about this, but just from reading the paper, it seems to me that this is a political issue. And it's a political issue at all levels, to include the library, I would suspect, the Hellertown Library, the Lower Saucon Township, this board, Upper Saucon. Everybody, the majorities of these various entities, in my opinion, are probably sometimes not all aligned politically. And so some of them are aligned with each other. And I think some of that is potentially driving this. It would be my hope on all levels, because I'm not going to judge who's driving what. But to Steve's point a moment ago, if it just seems to me there's some real potential for economies of scale for our library. That if you were to take on that kind of funding from Lower Saucon, that could potentially create a greater experience, a better experience for our township, our school, from my perspective, our school districts, which encompasses, to your point, Lower Milford, Coopersburg, and Upper Saucon, and then Lower Saucon Township. It seems to me that there's a real opportunity there to increase funding and to increase a greater experience at probably lesser costs, just because of the economies of scale, if it's done right. And I would hope that all the folks involved, would potentially put aside. There's clearly a war going on over there in Lower Saucon between Lower Saucon and Hellertown, but I hope it's not affecting Upper Saucon, our library board, this board, and others, in our judgment about what is probably the best course of action for who, our students and the citizens here. Because it just seems like there's some relatively obvious answers to me on its face, looking from the outside. It seems like some pretty good opportunities for our library to really take a step forward with increased funding, and to potentially provide a really better experience for all of us if we take advantage of that. And I understand there's some risks, I guess, to the library, but I kind of doubt there's going to be 11,000 people showing up at the, I mean, I wish they would, because I do love libraries and I like librarians, and I like librarians being employed and maybe even paid more. But I don't know. That's just my thoughts on it. I won't be here a whole lot longer. But I hope we can figure something out on this, because I think it's a great opportunity for you folks. I really do. If you look at it that way, I think if we look at it as an opportunity, I think the library, and I don't think you need this referendum. I think you can achieve better by increasing the funding from another source, and I think you'd be able to provide a better product at less cost, which is what I think all of us want, especially those of us that help fund you.
To that point that you made, I'm sorry, just because it's going to get lost. Has there been any indication from Upper Saucon? I know they came and spoke, but if you were to accept more funds with Lower Saucon and move in that direction, would they pull back there? But I mean, I know they've been wanting to, I know they mentioned their own, the township's own budgetary struggles with costs going up for certain equipment. For example, I still remember the gentleman who spoke, but have they indicated that they would plateau, drop, continue increases on the basis of requests and your budget, that type of thing? I'm just curious how the two, since they want you to take it so bad, and to your point, it's nice to take more money when you can, if it's being offered, depending on whether or not you're able to substantiate the increased enrollment in services. But just
There's been nothing definitive from them. It's been more of a casual mention that they need to, of course, keep an eye on their budget because they're looking at, actually, I believe they want to expand their building. And that obviously is going to cost them to do that. So they have mentioned that, but there's been nothing definitive.
So that's the thing. Like, I agree with you. I mean, but it may not be the total windfall, right? If you cut back somewhere else.
I'm with you.
Unfortunate, which would be unfortunate. It would be nice to keep it at least stable, so you would get a plus. But
I would say generally, and again, I don't know all the facts about this, but I think historically Upper Saucon has been pretty fair and has sort of been the guy carrying the water as other municipalities have
And us.
actually gone backwards. They've often either made up or at least kept steady or done whatever. So historically, if you look at them, I don't think you could say that they're the guys that are out to short the library. In fact, as we just heard, they provide a $1 lease for the property to them. I mean, it's kind of hard to say Upper Saucon's out to put the wood to the library. I think they want them to take this money, and quite frankly, as a kind of a neutral observer on the outside, because I don't really have a dog in this fight, it just seems to make some sense to me. But again, I suspect there's a whole lot of internal
Well, that's my question.
baseball going on.
If if the referendum passes and Upper Saucon decides to pull back their $1 lease to you, have you budgeted how much rent that would cost to stay there and take care of the land and everything like that?
There's been no discussion of
Do you have
that.
any idea of what that would cost, though, to rent a building like that and take care of the property on your own?
Well, we own the building. So what you're referring to is rental of just the property
Yeah.
and maintenance of the property.
Right.
No, but there's been absolutely no discussion on the part of Upper Saucon saying that if we get a tax referendum, that they would no longer lease us the land.
Okay.
That hasn't been mentioned at all.
Okay.
Yeah, I just going back to kind of putting a summary and helping me understand and what part of what we're discussing here tonight. And when Jeff Demmig started talking, I realized he asked a lot of good questions that posed some questions in my head. My understanding was part of you all coming here tonight and posing the question of, or the possibility, introducing the possibility of a referendum was, I believe I heard you say, and please correct me if I'm wrong, in the beginning, that this was kind of your first stop because the school district was the taxing entity that was the umbrella organization for Coopersburg, Lower Milford, and Upper Saucon. So this was your first stop, but that you also, I believe I heard you say fiduciary responsibility. You're also looking into other means and other lines of funding for grants, and also stopping in and checking in to see if the school district didn't want to be the referendum engine, as you were, to sponsor the referendum, what other municipalities or what other possibilities, maybe another municipality we would, or in conjunction with, or in partnership. It was not my understanding you were coming here tonight to kind of ask us to put on our agenda, would we please, sponsor a referendum? I want to make sure, I'm seeing nodding of heads. Is that basically my understanding is correct there? Okay. And then the other thing that Jeff made me think of, which was great, is if you decide to accept the Lower Saucon partnership and funding, that doesn't necessarily secure a consistent, predictable funding source like a referendum would, so that you could accept Lower Saucon's funding, but still pursue the option or the possibility of a referendum at some point with all municipalities. Because part of what I'm hearing from what you're saying and what I'm hearing other people talking about with funding is you are not a taxing authority. And so you are, at the behest of all these other municipalities to fund you. Just as an example, our school district budgeted the amount that we would typically give you in this year. But this year, unlike others, the board has chosen to cut you those checks on a quarterly manner instead of, an all at once voting to approve it and sending you the lump sum. And I'm sure that affects your cash flow and everything else with regard to budgeting. But if you have that variable in addition to that kind of variable, you're being funded at the will of the district, you're being funded at the will of Upper Saucon, you're being funded. So a referendum, although it does not imbue you with the power of being a taxing authority suddenly, like that referendum, if it occurs and if it's worked out between all these municipalities, and could be a partnership of a referendum between all of them. But if that happens, that millage that's listed on the referendum, one, it doesn't turn you into a taxing authority. And two, that would be your budget until another referendum occurred, correct? So that it is not like, it's not exactly a tax in perpetuity. So if you had a 1 mil or a 2 mil, whatever it was, that would be it. That would be your budget for the next 10, 12, 20, whenever another referendum was passed. So it's a solid, reliable source of funding, but that's it. Taxes don't go up, nothing changes. So I was just making sure I was understanding all those variables. It doesn't turn, and also explaining, it doesn't turn you into a taxing authority. It's not like a tax is going to go up. And it's not that you couldn't accept Lower Saucon as an entity and still not pursue a referendum or pursue grants. This is kind of your first stop in that exploratory funding venture with all parties involved. Am I understanding that correctly?
You are.
So you're not really coming to us to ask us to make a decision about this tonight, but I think you've heard a lot of good feedback about thoughts of current board members about that. So all right, thanks. I appreciate. Oh, and the only other thing I wanted to say with regard to, I know Steve, Mr. Maund, you mentioned, and a couple of folks mentioned the voting powers imbued to municipalities that don't have a 15% contribution to the budget of the library. I seem to recall, please somebody correct me if I'm wrong or if you know, although, for instance, Coopersburg does not contribute 15% to the operating budget of the library, from a per capita perspective, Coopersburg contributes one of the most significant amounts for its budget of its own municipality. That is to say, let's say Coopersburg Borough's annual budget is $100, and for it to contribute to your budget at 15%, that could be an amount that would, just because the operating budget that you have could be an amount that would take an exorbitant portion of their annual operating budget away from them. So from a per capita perspective, Coopersburg Borough's operating budget is much smaller than Upper Saucon's operating budget. So it might not be possible for them to contribute 15% just because of the disparity of size. Am I recalling that from a prior conversation about the per capita contribution?
I would agree that that's true, and that's also true for Lower Milford.
Absolutely. I was just using Coopersburg as an example. Yes, Lower Milford would be the same.
Yeah. Coopersburg right now, their per capita rate is $9.08. Lower Milford's is $6.65, and Upper Saucon is $11.25.
Okay, thank you. So that $9 versus Upper Saucon's 11, that ratio is what I was remembering from the disparity. So they are contributing significantly, even though from a dollar amount it might not be as. All right, thanks. I appreciate that.
Right. I want to just comment on something that you said about a tax referendum provides sustainability.
Yes, please.
For the library. And our method of getting money for our budget now is going out to each of the municipalities and obviously the school district. And we never know exactly from one year to the next how that's going to go and whether that budget is going to be approved. Given the political climate over in Lower Saucon Township, I know Mark and Kathy mentioned, I believe before I arrived, that we have put on the table for them a temporary month-to-month proposal, like a trial run of how that would work. And one of the things that they've mentioned to us that would be important to them is usage statistics. So right now their residents don't have borrowing privileges with us, but last month we did some stats and we had 96 Lower Saucon Township residents out of 11,000 who were had active cards at our library. And if that continues, even when they join us, that's not a very good percentage. And that should give them an indication that their people want to be with Hellertown, and would justify or validate, I guess is the best word, what the people who've attended our board meetings from Lower Saucon have been saying. It also would validate all the phone calls and all the visits we've been getting from people recently, because they don't understand what's happening there. So if that becomes the case, what reason would they have to continue to fund us? So there is a great risk, I think, because they have an election coming up, and I don't think their people are going to use us. So if we depend on them as another funding source, I think that could come back to haunt us in the future.
Thank you, Mrs. Arndt. I do have one observation, I guess, for the board to consider. And that I want to preface it by saying that whether it's a referendum or which municipality gets accepted or doesn't, those are policy issues that are reserved for the board, not really for administration. We obviously would try to advise the best we can. But I offer this comment as an advocate for Southern Lehigh School District. And it's with respect to the change in bylaws. And we are told that for 60 years this has gone on a fairly innocuous way because there were no conflicting issues. Yet at the library board chose to disrupt that long-term stability by changing the bylaws.
No.
But no.
No, that's inaccurate.
Okay.
Upper Saucon made the request that we change the bylaws.
Oh, to exclude.
Yes.
Well, actually, to permanently include.
No.
Okay. So perhaps I'm misunderstanding then. The bylaws, as they're updated, are excluding Coopersburg and Lower Milford.
That's correct.
Then I stand corrected, and I need not say, I thought it was the other way around. The bylaws were being set. So thank you. That satisfies my concern completely.
Just a couple of comments from Ms. Gaiman. The cash flow by our quarterly payments is not necessarily affected. They have a half $500,000 in reserve. So from a cash flow standpoint, that should not be an issue.
Oh, sure. I just meant if
And
every
then-
single municipality
Yeah.
just needed to do that, I
Okay.
can see how, I didn't mean to insinuate
Yeah.
that we're shorting them in any way. I just
Okay.
know it's hard to plan from a
Yeah.
financial perspective if somebody decides to either eliminate funding or change it.
Right.
That's all. That
Okay,
would be a
and then-
lot of moving parts.
Yeah,
that's
and
all.
then secondly, the millage rate is based upon property values, and they tend to increase, and there tend to be additional construction in the township. So there's built-in buffers as time moves by, even though it's the same percentage that it increases. So that helps to counteract constant increases in millage. Ergo, what we do here at the school district or at the township.
Sure,
and
that would
then,
be the hope.
um,
I think we all know that this year in particular, even our tax base has been affected by the revaluation and the
Right.
lowering of property values.
Yes.
So yeah,
Correct.
that's ideal, but it can't be counted on. But yeah, that's
And
that's
then,
hopefully how it works.
And then I'm just wondering, there are 553 Lower Saucon Township members in the Hellertown Library out of X number. I think they have maybe 17,000 people or so. What is the number from Upper Saucon, for example, in the attendance in the library, just as an example? Yeah, how many? You said there were 553 members, right? From Lower Saucon that would potentially move here. How many CARB members do we have at this point? I don't have the numbers in front. I know they're in an email, but I didn't have that
Well,
up.
they're also in your monthly board
Right.
packets, too.
Yes, and I've looked at them before. I just don't know them off the top of my head. And I know you have that paper there.
So when you say, I just want a point of clarification.
Okay.
You said 553 members.
I
from Lower Saucon?
Ms. Parsons,
Okay, I don't have that figure. I don't-
okay.
So I
Okay.
was not aware of
I
that.
guess what I'm getting at is comparing the number of members in Lower Saucon Township to their population versus Upper Saucon Township to our population here or in the three townships, you could infer a basic attendance with that to see how real, as a realistic number for estimating purposes to understand what the influx will be. And it'll probably be even a little less because you mentioned they're further away, et cetera. But is it really, how much is that impacting your operation? So that's just a point to think about and to look at when you're looking at the budgeting. And then the last thing, I would like to request a number of checkouts of material K through 12 by grade. So I think you mentioned earlier that you could do that because you know the checkouts, not so much the people or the students or members, but the checkouts themselves of the material for K through 12 so that it helps us to correlate how our students are utilizing the library. I know there's that pre-K nugget that doesn't consider, but I'm just wondering about how much each one of those grades are utilizing the library. I had asked, I think the last time we were here, about some metrics and they were tough to come by. So I just was thinking during your discussion that you could just provide us the number of books or materials by grade, and it could help us understand the utilization of our students at the library.
Do you mean
Why
by,
would you do it by grade?
yeah, do you mean by material? Like this is a book designed for
We can't
kindergartners
even
and it
tell
gets
Sure.
kids
checked out?
versus adults
Yeah.
because the
Well,
parents
that's
are
because
checking
if
it
you
out.
don't look at, if you look at the book,
But the book isn't always specific to one grade. Like
well,
there's young
it's ranges
adults.
so that you could at least see, you can infer from that information the utilization of high school / middle school students and then elementary students with that material so that we can just understand the utilization through that. That's a pretty straightforward thing, right?
Yeah, just a point of clarification. What you're talking about with the mill rate is spot on. Last year, when this conversation started up, or back in June or July, you were talking about 0.17 of a mill, which equated to $475,000, which was roughly your budget at the time. That same 0.17 today would generate $496,000, so that's up 4.5%. Now, one net mill has already gone up 1.5%, and there's no, we had projected that at the time, which we were correct, but there's no guarantee. But if the net mill goes down, it's going to go down across the board, and every entity is going to feel the same pinch.
Right.
But it does typically appreciate.
Thanks.
So can I answer Mr. Mon's statistics question? First of all, we cannot get circulation statistics by grade level. We can tell you how many children check out books, how many items are checked out by children. But one of the things you need to understand is that up until very recently, we did not offer anything for children under 5. Their parents checked things out on their behalf. We have just started in the last month a My First Library card option for 0 to 5 years. So we do not have statistics on that yet. We also are requiring all children now to have library cards to be part of our programming, so that we can get some of those statistics, at least programming statistics, not necessarily checkout statistics. We also have a number of families who prefer, just for easy use for them, to come in and take everybody in the family, take all their materials out on one card. I can't control that, and I can't force them
Right. Sure.
to do that.
And I
So
understand
the
that. Yep.
statistics would be very skewed. I mean, I will provide them for you, and they actually are part of our state report, but I can't say that they're tremendously accurate for
Yeah.
that reason.
You could overlay the high school students because the high school students are typically, I would propose, typically going to the library on their own and using their own card. I would even think middle school to high school students would be doing that. Number one, they probably want to use their card, and
Uh,
I-
You would think that they would, especially if they're of driving age, they would drive themselves there and so forth. But I will tell you that the bulk of our children's materials are going out to younger.
right, and that's why I
students.
suggested looking at the number of book transactions, regardless of people, because if you're taking out Curious George, for example, if a parent is taking that out, Curious George is probably going to be for a child. So then you can start looking at the number of transactions by those books, which are 5 and less, or 9 and less, so that we can get just a better visibility on who is actually using the library, because there's a lack of statistic there. That's why I was wondering. So anyway, that's it.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Could I also offer, if anyone would like a tour of the library? I know it front and back. It's fun to go through. Takes 5 minutes. Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks. Tim Carney, 3 quick points. First of all, support the arts. Our school musical runs next Wednesday to Sunday. It's the final countdown. Come feel the noise and have nothing but a good time. Don't stop believing in our students. I have the scan code here if anybody wants to buy their tickets tonight. I just want to thank everybody that's been involved so far in advance. And it's been amazing to meet it's a new time for me being involved with it. So I didn't realize the network of parents that are so supportive of it. So that's been an eye-opener for me. There's a second point. There's this coding competition open to high school students through Lockheed Martin. Teams can be 2 or 3 people. I have the info if needed. It can be virtual. It's down in King of Prussia. If it's virtual, I believe we can have as many teams as we want. So if we know any high school students, I don't know how to get that word out if you're interested. Last thing is Freedom's Foundation extended their deadline, application deadline for a workshop for teachers. It's for any teacher. It's free. You have to give up a week in the summer if you're not doing other preparation for school or job or anything. And it's good for Act 48. I see classes on Lincoln, Medal of Honor. I'm taking the Women's in History. There's a constitutional class geared just for new teachers. And it's useful. I've picked up ideas to use in the classroom. I took a Medal of Honor program, and at the time they didn't have an elementary track. So the Medal of Honor values were courage, sacrifice, citizenship, integrity, commitment, and patriotism. And what I did was I went to the library and picked up some books that were connected to each of those values and brought it down to a first grade level. So it is useful. It would save teachers money. And again, it's something that I would hope that we would put out somehow. Thank you.
What was the name of that organization, Tim? Freedom
Foundation. I'm part of their volunteer board. So start. Can I keep going or no?
I just didn't quite hear so it's Freedom's Foundation.
Foundation down in Valley Forge, started by Dwight Eisenhower, and Ronald Reagan did a program for it. So great organization.
You put that hook out there for me.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Thank you. I want to thank the library volunteers, those here tonight on behalf of the library. I think the community would agree that the library provides an essential public service and it deserves fair funding. I want to thank the board members for their insight on the library issue. We can see, or I can see as a community member now, why the district is in much better financial shape. You have an eye on budget, on fair budget. I think the discussion showed that tonight. When a nonprofit and government-supported entity like the library has a fund balance that represents over 130% of its yearly budget, then I believe they have clearly collected more than what is necessary from taxpayers through taxing authorities in the past. If the school board is the issuing authority for the tax referendum, then I would imagine that the community would need representation on the library board, and that the school board would appoint all of those members. I think that would be the legal requirement based upon the principle of no taxation without representation. I don't think the library maybe has considered that would be the outcome. And Dr. Wayach's point that he said that Upper Sauk and Coopersburg and Lower Milford, if they're not part of this discussion, they likely will not offer a tax abatement based upon not funding the library any longer. And then what happens then is a flat 0.2% millage increase to community members in Southern Lehigh. And that might not seem like a lot, but I would almost guarantee it would drive at least a dozen or 2 dozen seniors from their lifetime homes. I've talked to seniors who have had to sell their lifetime homes because of increased taxes. That's immoral and unethical. I encourage the board not to be the sponsoring authority for a tax increase. Thank you.
Are we doing that?